And joining me now to discuss this is advocate Maurice Hirsh of the Jerusalem Center for Security and Foreign Affairs, or for short, the JCFA. Maurice, thank you so much for joining.
Hey, good afternoon.
So you and I, we're not Israeli officials, but to me at least, it is clear as day that Hamas will never, ever disarm. Do you agree?
I think we're looking at three different vectors when we're looking at the Gaza Strip. One is Hamas on the ground. Hamas on the ground at the moment is seeing no pushback whatsoever. They have no reason really to volunteer to disarm themselves. They are re-establishing their governance functions. They are re-establishing their control of the Gaza Strip. And there's no one really to come in and push them out or to force them to do anything else. Then that's one vector. The second vector is the National Committee for the Administration of Gaza. This is the committee that's set up underneath the Board of Peace that's meant to really run Gaza in place of Hamas. They haven't really got off the ground. They've set up a nice new website. They've put out a call for policemen, people to come and volunteer to be policemen under this new framework. These are the people who would be in charge of potentially replacing Hamas. But nothing really is happening moving forward there. They know at the moment that they need the acceptance of Hamas in order to take any step forward. And then you have the Board of Peace itself, which is really trying to negotiate moving forward while at the same time understanding that Hamas has no incentive to disarm. It's unlikely to disarm. And as you said, we know very clearly that Hamas will never disarm. They've now said that the precondition for any type of discussion about their disarmament is Israel's full withdrawal and the end of the occupation. They don't mean the Gaza Strip. They mean Israel submitting to their dictates of really turning out the lights on the Jewish state. That's their basic demand, and they will settle for nothing else. So really that illusion of Hamas disarming is something which we will never see, I believe, ever coming to fruition.
Mm-hmm. And, as you mentioned, it's really just a tragic irony that the time that it's taking for us to figure out what to do with Gaza, with the Gaza Strip, Hamas is taking this time, as you say, to reestablish itself, both politically, militarily, whatever you want to call it. But Maurice, for our viewers who might not be as versed on what is going on inside the Gaza Strip, can you just enlighten us on what exactly that means? What does that mean, the control? What are the checkpoints that they're setting up? How have they gained control, both militarily and politically?
So Hamas still has a very, very large armed force operating in the Gaza Strip, the area that is outside of the control of the IDF. In those areas, they are enforcing their control through the means that they know that have served them well from their point of view since 2007, which is violence. And when violence isn't sufficient, extreme violence, including public executions, beatings, and everything that goes up to that. Businesses are subject to really intense violence, threats. They have to pay taxes to the Hamas terrorists. They have to pay taxes to the Hamas mechanisms to just continue functioning and providing services to the Gaza people. We have this massive inflow of humanitarian aid, so-called, that's coming into the Gaza Strip. It's all coming under the auspices and the demands of Hamas. Hamas is rebuilding. It's really as the major employer in the Gaza Strip is saying, we have the ability to pay you money because there's money coming into the Gaza Strip from every direction possible. And there's the food coming in and there's aid coming in that's being sold and Hamas is taking its cut. If during the war itself, Hamas made somewhere in the region between $500 to $750 million selling aid that they'd received for free, now those sums are going up exponentially. And Hamas is reestablishing itself both with violence on the street and financially as an employer, guaranteeing a stable income. That's what they're doing on the ground to make sure that they maintain their stranglehold around the Gazan people's necks. And that's really the sadness of all of this. We were meant to have two external moderators, mediators, who were going to use their influence to act against Hamas, to force Hamas's compliance. Turkey on the one side, Qatar on the other hand. Qatar have done nothing whatsoever while they were under attack, and because the Hamas leadership didn't condemn the Iranian attacks on Qatar, so Qatar threatened to expel the Hamas leaders, but they haven't been expelled. Have no fears. The Qataris are still in bed with Hamas. The Turkish, on the other hand, are deepening their connections with Hamas. That's that Muslim Brotherhood connection. They have no interest whatsoever in forcing Hamas compliance. Their foreign minister is an open supporter of Hamas and of terror and violence. This isn't something which is going to be used as leverage. Hamas has substantial financial interests in Turkey. Turkey does have substantial leverage over Hamas, but it has zero intention to actually use that leverage to disarm Hamas, because they see them as their allies, as their bedfellows, rather than a genocidal terrorist organization.
So, Maurice, do you think that we're essentially wasting valuable resources? I mean, we have this so-called Board of Peace. There's the International Stabilization Force, or also the NCAG, as you mentioned, that's supposed to come in and do this work and just sort of, cleanse Gaza from these over a decade of just torture for their people. Are we wasting these resources? Could this have worked? But maybe is it potentially the war with Iran that's distracting? What do you think about the idea, really, of the Board of Peace, the ISF, the NCAG, etc.?
So I think that the war in Iran obviously was a factor in how much focus could be given to the subject of the Gaza Strip in and of itself, and definitely that was a relevant factor. I think the question of the ISF, the International Stabilization Force, has always been one of those common misunderstandings. Were they there to come in as an international armed force in order to dismantle and disarm Hamas? Was Hamas going to disarm itself? Was there any chance there would be international intervention against Hamas in the Gaza Strip? I think that was one of the subjects that was never clear from the start. And as the situation moves on and as time moves on, we're seeing that there's less and less desire or will from international actors to provide forces on the ground who will actively engage and combat Hamas. And so if no one is going to do that dirty work of actually taking Hamas to task and actually seizing their weapons, and Hamas is never going to give up on their weapons, so when is that going to happen? How is that going to happen? When will Israel finally say, you know what, enough is enough? We are now going to do our own dirty work for ourselves because everything else has unfortunately failed. That's just a question of time.
Right. I was gonna, as you mentioned, it seems like really the only force that's capable and willing to go in are the Israel Defense Forces. Do you think that there's a chance that we'll be back in Gaza? I'm not talking about, the yellow line that we're still, hovering around. I mean, pushing more in and taking, as you say, matters into our own hands. Do you think that's going to happen? And if it will it happen soon?
Well, I think as the war in Iran possibly dies out, fizzles out, we'll see what happens with the negotiations, whether it's actually renewed or not. I think we're going to see very much an uptick in the terror activity coming out of the Gaza Strip. We saw it before the war in Gaza. It hasn't gone entirely during the war, but has been much quieter. And now once the attention of the world can be refocused on the Gaza Strip, let's leave Lebanon out of the equation for the moment. And that attention now comes back when you add in the flotilla that's coming back to reinvigorate and re-empower Hamas. That's something which also needs to be taken into account. And so Hamas is literally, and I shudder to say this, but is actually feeling the love from the international community to stay in power, whether it's the Qataris, whether it's the Turks, whether it's the flotilla, whether it's the international community that is showing no real desire to do something positive for the people of Gaza, and actually provide them with a solution against these terrorists. That's something which is unfortunate, but we're going to see it coming back. And eventually, yes, I fear that Israel will have to take more active steps than it has done for a very long time.
Yeah, unfortunately. And I actually want to go back with you a little bit back to Iran, who is essentially, the benefactor for all things, weapons. And they are the supply chain for Hamas. They do supply them with everything that they have. So do you think that this sort of supply chain could be cut at this point in the war, especially if the Islamic regime's capabilities are hampered enough? Do you think that would have a significant effect on what's going on in Gaza? Or is that just a completely different arena, and also the West Bank as well, also supplying and also getting weapons from Jordan as well?
I mean, there we really have to see what happens with the war in Iran. If the Iranians come out of this and the regime stays in its place and is then emboldened by a $2 million fee for every ship that goes through the Straits of Hormuz, and we're talking about 50 ships a day, that's $100 million a day, they will very, very quickly regain the losses of the war, and then having finances also unfrozen from around the world in the Gulf countries. So the question of the war in Iran will undoubtedly affect what's going on in Gaza. At the moment, obviously, Hamas is hedging its bets, hoping that their regime, that the benefactors will stay in power and they will continue to enjoy both the financial, military, and political support. But at the moment, I don't think they know where exactly things are going to. So they are also hedging their bets. They're saying something very clear. We're not giving up by ourselves. We will continue fighting on no matter what. And where the aid comes from, whether it necessarily only comes from Iran, whether it comes from Qatar, whether it comes from Turkey, we've seen a number of the so-called aid trucks trying to bring in goods and equipment and possibly even weaponry being smuggled into Hamas under the auspices of humanitarian aid. That is something which will always continue to plague us as we go along. So Hamas, I think, is genuinely enjoying this period of diverted attention and is doing its utmost to do everything it can to really reestablish, rearm, rebuild its forces, and at the moment enjoying support from every corner. So whether it's only the Iranians in their corner is a question in and of itself.
Absolutely. And unfortunately, it is the quiet that is the most dangerous time of them all, because they are regrouping and rearming. Maurice Hirsh, thank you so much for coming on the show. And you always give us those crystal clear insights that a lot of people might not usually have access to. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me.